Okay.
So, right. Welcome to Conversations with Barbara. I'm Barbara Canelopoulos, and today I'm with Robert Peters. He's from Mashpee, and he's of Wampanoag ancestry. We're talking here about his poetry and his art and about Indigenous spirituality. Stay with us. Welcome to the program, Robert. I think we should start out by talking about your recent production, which is the 13 Moons calendar. Viewers will be able to see pictures from that, and I have a copy right here. It is a 2020 calendar, and it represents a lot of your views of what it is to enjoy Indigenous spirituality. So let's have viewers watch, see a few of those pictures from the calendar. And I'll start out by asking your purpose in the calendar.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Barbara. I actually started doing, I was compelled when I retired I drove trains for 24 years. And when I retired, I started doing artwork. And I, first of all, focused on 2015. And I did 13 paintings for the calendar that was originally released in 2015. And I re-released it for 2020. And as I was finishing the calendar, I coupled it with some of my poetry that I had written over a period of 20 years, 20 or so years. And the poetry went really well with the paintings. Hence, the subtitle to 13 Moons Calendar is a meditation on Indigenous life.
Yes, yes, and I gather that you're very interested in having the Indigenous spirituality to have people of Wampanoag ancestry and Indigenous peoples live lives that are in tune with Indigenous spirituality.
Yes, one of the things that we do is we have readings, and we have different people read the poems from it. And by gathering, you know, people in our own settings, and not watching TV or using our devices, but using our own voices, is a form of taking our power back. And this is something that I hope that we can continue. So we've done the performance in the ceremonial circle, we've done the performance around open fire, we've done it in churches, and in people's homes. And I want to continue that and have other people do their variations on what I did.
Yes, that's really very interesting, and there's really such a resurgence of interest in that, in being at one with nature. So I can see that nature figures largely in this form of spirituality.
Yes, yes. I think we are, and one of the things in the introduction to the poem is we are living in a society that pushes nature away, but we're taught and raised to be a part of nature, to respect nature, and to have a role as caretakers of the earth. And society is the opposite of that. So we're raised this way, but when we go out, we have to do things that are quite contrary to what we believe. And it creates sort of a paradox, not just for Wampanoag people, but I think for any Indigenous people.
Yes, I can see that. As I was reading your poetry and your stories in the calendar, I began to write down some questions, and then it occurred to me, I remembered a line by Louis Armstrong, and he said, if you have to ask questions about jazz, you're not going to understand the answers. So that worries me, and I think that maybe Indigenous spirituality is like jazz, not a concept, but much more of a feeling, and a behavior, something felt, not necessarily thought about. What do you think of that? Am I right?
I think Native spirituality isn't judgmental, and is passed to us through oral traditions. It's not something that's dictated to you, and it really depends on your interpretation and your conversation with not just with the creator, but with your environment, with the woods or with the bay, you know, and when you walk down to the bay or walk through the woods, in a sense, you're in church. And I think anybody who walks, you know, goes to a certain place in nature, regardless of, you know, what their spiritual upbringing is they're in prayer when they're in these places, or when they go and they'll walk along the beach, because they need to be in the presence of the Creator. And the disadvantage to our spirituality is, you know, part of what makes it great too, is it's something that's passed orally.
Oh, yes.
It's not dictated to you.
Yeah. There were no written scriptures.
No, and it has a disadvantage because there's no set place. We don't have nonprofits that, you know, where we can build our sweat lodges or our ceremonial circles. These are, it's not for sale. And if there's something that we have that is part of our traditional structure, you know, it's something we build ourselves, you know, provided by what the environment provides. You know, so if we want to build a lodge, we'll go out and get preferably willow for the frame, you know, and we'll gather our materials from the environment.
And I think that in one of your poems you speak about, or you write about, being exiled from that whole place. And
I think, yes, I think and let me say this first. I think, I know that everybody is indigenous to somewhere.
Okay.
And rather than look at indigenous, you know, in my perspective as being a Wampanoag person, that indigenous issues are a worldwide issue. And one of the things that having this conversation, you know, and the poetry that goes along with that, one of our goals is to take the indigenous issue and the environmental issue and make them the same conversation.
That makes such a lot of sense. And then you are also, in the calendar, you speak about your ancestry, and I really enjoyed this very much. Your ancestry as being, what you're from Aquina, England, Prince Edward Island, Sparta, Georgia, New Bedford, the Netherlands by way of Suriname, and from Mattapan. That's a rich movable feast.
Well, you know, that's one of my favorite parts of the reading, because when we do the reading for the calendar, we might have 4 or 5 different readers. And at that point in the reading, every reader gets up and says where their ancestors come from. And you always see people light up when they hear like the similar places or the, you know, and with us being right here, most of those places are along the Gulf Stream, where the ships went and the shipping.
Yes, yes.
And some of my ancestors were in the whaling tradition. You know, some of my ancestors came on slave ships. And other ancestors were defeated by the ships that came, and those ships carried blankets that you know, killed 500,000 people in 6 weeks in 1618 or something like that.
Yes, you have some tragedies in the past, but those folks did move around a great deal. And I think also I gather from your descriptions of the kind of spirituality that you think should be part of our lives today, there are rituals. It may not, it's an oral culture, but you do have rituals. Perhaps you can demonstrate one of those rituals for our viewers that bring you close to nature. And I think we have a screenshot of one of those.
Well, we spoke about earlier about one of the poems called "The First Round."
Yes.
And that describes the sweat lodge ceremony. And I can actually read that to you.
Yes.
And one of the things we do during the readings is we have music behind, and we use samples. I sample some Miles Davis for some of the things.
Great.
Yusef Lateef, and I always tell people when I'm explaining that, because I want them to feel free to do that too, and like really expand how we use spoken word. And for this one here, I use a traditional song, and then the song is called "Thank God," and I read with that accompanying it.
Wonderful. Let's hear it.
Entering the lodge is returning to the womb of Mother Earth. Rocks taken from a bed of coal and passed through the door are all ancestors, and we thank each one with a sprinkle of tobacco, as the ancient ones are carefully placed in the center of the lodge. The firekeeper covers the entrance, so no light exists other than the ancestors' fading orange glow. Water poured over them hisses and evaporates instantly into hot steam that billows up and around, creating heat upon heat. In the darkness, you endure, pray, talk, and sing. This is the first round of many that must be endured before exiting the lodge, rejuvenated and reborn.
Thank you very much. That's very moving. I have, there is so much in your calendar that that's interesting, and that I want to, in spite of what Louis Armstrong said, I'm going to question. And that is the name of Marsha. Marsha, who was Marsha?
Marsha was a giant, and he looked over the people, the little people, us little people, and he smoked a pipe. And when the fog came in, that was Marsha smoking his pipe.
I see.
And when you smoke a pipe, you got to empty it. So he would empty out his pipe, and that's how Martha's Vineyard was formed.
Interesting, interesting. That I will think of our shop. Certainly we have plenty of fog rolling in on the Cape. Very, very nice. Another is, and I think we spoke about some of the tragic events in Native American history, and one of them is the Great Swamp Massacre, and the defeat of Wampanoag.
Yes.
What happened?
Well, Wampanoag, there's a lot of different ways people say it, was Massasoit's son, and he was the second son. And when relations with the English became intolerable, he declared war on the English. And there was a very bloody war fought. Yeah. And the Great Swamp is where Wampanoag was ultimately defeated.
I see.
And I actually speak about that in the calendar, where I went to the Great Swamp for the first time.
Yes, yes, yeah. So that has become also a ritual that you can reenact and to come in touch with with Native spirituality.
Well, I think storytelling is important, and telling that story of my connection to that is important, and it's also important to encourage people to tell their stories, because we are, oral people, and even though these things are written down, they're written so that they can be spoken. So it's written to be orated.
And you're carrying this message around. I understand that you did an installation at the Gardner Museum on Indigenous Peoples Day. Tell us what that was like.
Actually, it was very nice. They had set up the theater, and we had all of the technical support. And we were able to show the slides as we read, and we had readers in 3 different locations.
Good.
And each poem was read by a different reader, or some readers would read several.
I see.
And it was very moving. Somebody came up to me yesterday and said they were there.
Really? Yeah, yes. I'm sure that was really impressive. Do you feel as if you want to carry this message around and do similar things in various places, in addition to and your writing and your art?
Well, what I want to do is I want to take this to Indigenous communities, local. And when I say local, I mean New England area. Right. And I also want to have workshops and sessions where I listen to people recite their own poetry, or their own songs, and I'm seeking material for the next calendar. Which would be a meditation on Indigenous life, Volume 2. And that would involve our connections to the water, or us being, cultures where water is very important to us.
I see. My sense is that your notion of Native American spirituality is an important aspect that can be brought into people's lives today and enrich their lives. Am I correct in thinking that way, that those elements that you're bringing back that have perhaps not been well known are important enough for people to know about them, so that they can introduce them into their own lives and perhaps gain comfort from them?
Yeah, I think, yes, I think that the resurgence of our oral traditions is important. You know, the power of your voice, that using your voice and having people listen to what you say, and you listening to what they say, and using it, you know, to tell our history, for entertainment, to make choices and decisions.
Yeah.
That's all taking back power that we very readily give away.
Yes, yes, yes. And also to tell the old stories and to tell new stories. So it continues, rather than having passive entertainment that seems to me as if you're talking about making our own entertainment by sharing stories, by singing, by rituals. Certainly that does enrich a life that has been very much removed from nature.
Yes, and I think the idea of telling new stories or creating new tradition is an important thing. That, you know, tradition isn't something that isn't always something in the past. It's something that we might bring might start right now, or we might take something that we used for one thing and reapply it for something else. With some of my work with addiction, we're writing a curriculum for teen drug prevention among Native American teens, and we use tradition, like the stomp dance. We would go to different powwows and socials and have a stomp dance for people and families that are impacted by addiction. And a lot of people have people that they've lost. Yeah. You know, and in the 5 years that I've been working with this project, in the Mashpee tribe alone, we've lost somebody, you know, every month.
Yeah, that's tragic.
And we've, you know, so to take that and be able to have that outlet where at an event, if you're suffering, you know, or you're feeling that pain, or you are trying to overcome that addiction, to know that you can get into the stomp line and use that dance and prayer and tradition, you know, to express that you want to overcome that you want to stomp out that addiction. That's one way, you know. And we're, you know, in that same curriculum, we're using tradition in other ways. One of the things we talk about is the power of the circle. And when you're in a circle, that circle has power. But if you bring bad things into the circle, like mean-spiritedness, then that mean-spiritedness will also have the power of the circle if it's accepted in that circle. So you have responsibility over the circle to say, well, no, you can't do that. You can't talk to that person like that. Or you can't bring this substance into this circle. Or not in my circle. And if that circle encompasses all that, you don't have to be in that circle. You can go to another circle. But you don't have to give that your power.
I see. So that all of this, these traditions then fit in with innovative therapies. And I think that also you had thought that this fits in with some current environmental movements as well.
You know, one thing about my art and my poetry is I don't tend to place us in the past. I don't, I don't fixate on what was. I try and put us now.
Yes, yes.
Or in the future. And we're not some, I mean, we do have a very powerful and oftentimes tragic past, but we have infinity behind us and we have infinity in front of us.
Right.
And we have to look towards the infinity that's in front of us.
And so it's forward thinking then, looking at solutions, today's solutions, the problems with addiction and with environmental degradation. So I can see what you're saying. It's not just a spirituality about yesterday. It's about something that can be a living force today for people of indigenous peoples.
Well, like even the issue of global warming, to me, it's kind of like to look at it that way. Our people came here. We came here. We didn't always live here. We came here when the glaciers receded. And that's how like Boston Harbor was formed by the Cape Cod was formed by the glaciers. And when the glaciers revealed this land to us and the rivers and the estuaries that they created, we said, oh, what a great place to live. And that's how we came here.
This has been so interesting. And your calendar is really very, very interesting. The art is beautiful. And the stories and the writing and the poetry as well. And I thank you so much for being with us and giving us a glimpse of this very interesting heritage. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks for viewing, and we hope to see you again soon, next time on Conversations with Barbara.